Howdy, everybody. Our historian at Wesley Chapel Church, Candi Talley, has asked that I write a historical reflection on this time at Wesley Chapel. And so I'd like to share some of that with you. I was sitting on the back porch of the parsonage as I began writing this historical reflection. And our puppy, Ingrid, ambled by, and I gave her a puppy greeting, something like, well, she's our little survivor girl. Survivor girl? Well, the other day, Ruth's brother and his wife came by for a visit, and we remarked how Ingrid is highly food motivated. As gentle and as relational as she may be, if you mess with her supper while she's eating, well, you might just get a growl. Arr. My sister-in-law offered that this behavior may go back to the period before Ingrid came our way. In her earliest days, she might have been deprived, so that even now, even she has more food than she needs, well, she remains in survival mode. During the last 6 months, we at Wesley Chapel, we've been going through a time of some serious deprivation ourselves. With the COVID-19 restrictions, we've had to make do with a lot of isolation and uncertainty about the future. I can report with gratitude that we have lost no one in our church family to the virus. But it has affected us, our families and friends. And our church has not been immune, to the stress that it has afflicted on the whole world. I think back to those early days and the decision to cancel Sunday morning worship. And then the doors of the sanctuary were closed for Easter. We preacher types, we went on a crash course to learn how to facilitate online worship. And before it was all over, we started online small groups and church council meetings online and online devotionals. It's funny. I have known for years that creating this deeper online presence was part of the opportunity before us here at Wesley Chapel. Our Elizabeth Philippi, she'd already developed a Facebook page. But nobody knew how essential all this would become this year. And with the challenge in front of her, Elizabeth did not look back. We started doing worship on Facebook Live, then YouTube, and making connections we wouldn't have otherwise made. As part of the church's response to the pandemic, we created a task force to help guide the church toward the day we will be back at worship in the sanctuary. The task force proposed a protocol for health and safety, relying on the data from the Harvard Global Health Institute. That way, everybody can see where we are in the process. At this point in the journey toward full reopening, we can have meetings of 10 or fewer people outside with face masks and social distancing. Our youth may meet at church next week, but so far, all our small group ministries, our acolytes and our youth and our How Is Your Soul meeting, they've all continued to meet on Zoom. We've had newcomers on Zoom groups. I even wonder if it's sometimes a little less threatening to try a new group from your computer at home. I'm thinking, even after we're all back to the so-called new normal, we'll still provide the opportunity for some form of online worship and maybe some Zoom meetings too. I say all that even as we all know it's not been the same all this virtual stuff. There is something life-giving about genuine physical touch. You can't get a hug from a computer, can you? As we live through this season, I'm reminded how the incarnation is such a part of our faith. God loved us so much that he didn't send us an email or make a YouTube video, but he gave his only son. And he became one of us, took on human flesh, and finally died for us. And for all this online stuff that we're doing, as much as we appreciate it and want to continue these connections, I think there is also a deep desire within our family to physically connect with one another, would you say? So that our flesh and bones are the agents and the recipients of love too. You see, the God that we worship is himself a community of self-giving love. And you wonder if this season isn't teaching us something fresh about how we, his image bearers, were made for connection. I, for one, am challenged during these days to order my days to give more time for those connections with people. And my prayer is that by the time this whole pandemic season is over, we will all have new habits of connection with God, with one another, and with a hurting world. As I consider the survival of the church during this season of deprivation, I think about the thoughtfulness and the commitment of our leadership. This year, Margaret and Reese took on the chair of our finance committee. And you say, man, what a year to give that a go. And whether it was working on the government loan to help pay the preacher's salary, or organizing this financial audit right in the middle of a shutdown, well, Margaret was true to her utterly responsible self. And this year, Bob Reeve became the chair of our church council. Again, I want to say, what a year to take on that position. Running meetings on Zoom, joining a team of men Sunday after Sunday to provide for drive-in church. Well, Bob hasn't slowed down. And there are plenty more leaders to thank, and I'm grateful. You know, one of the treasures of this year has been the chance for some of us to spend more time with Bob and Sharon's grandson, Tyler Luker. And he's been volunteering to help with drive-in church. And another one has been this. Lance Smith is one of our newest members. I think he has the gift of faith. He and Sharon aren't physically present these days at church. But on Sunday mornings, I call him up and he consecrates the day with his anointed prayers for the service on the phone. You may not know that Lance was a professional trombonist who has played with, among others, the great Frank Sinatra. I think that when we look back at this year, it's going to be a Sinatra classic that helps to frame it all. All sorts of uncertainty, yes. Loneliness and struggles working through to the new normal, for sure. But in the end, I believe we're going to be able to join with old Blue Eyes and say, as we survived 2020, it was a very good year. I have found myself making this declaration. Either this thing is going to shut our little church down, or it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to us. Because of the grace of God, I've got to believe that we're going to come out of this season not just as bruised and battered survivors, but as conquerors. Conquerors who are learning through this time. We're learning afresh the depth of our belovedness in Jesus. Conquerors who can, out of that confidence, demonstrate God's love in all sorts of fresh ways to a hurting world. Oh, in the name of our Lord Jesus. Looking forward to our future together, brothers and sisters. Again, thanks again for the chance thanks be to God for the chance to be together again online, and looking forward to see you next time. Peace, joy, love.